Welcome to another episode of Talk with Tech Leaders. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by an individual who's actually based in Teesside like myself, and I feel very privileged that I'm able to shine a bit of a spotlight on some of the good work that's happening in the local area as well. So Josh, thank you for joining me today.
No worries.
And could you just give a bit of an introduction to yourself for the listeners of the podcast?
Yeah, so I'm Joshua Legg. I am CTO and co-founder of Greenlord Studios, tech agency in the Northeast, specializing in C#.net.
Great, that's music to my ears. That's the industry that I work in. And how long have you been working in the industry?
So really, I got my start in the industry from a young age, but I've been in tech for about 15 years.
Okay, and what age did you start your journey in software development? Because I know from speaking to other people on the podcast and a lot of developers in my work, everyone has sort of like a unique story in terms of what sort of got their sort of juices going. What made them interested in it. So what was yours?
When I was 15 and looking at going into college, I already really enjoyed IT at school. And one of my mum's businesses needed some websites doing. So at the age of 15, I'd already found just some freelance web work and had really got started from there. But then moved on from there, going into college, then university, and sort of a fairly traditional route into programming.
Would you say that you went down quite a traditional route of becoming a software developer in the position that you're in at the moment?
Yeah, so I took the sort of what everyone assumes is the ordinary route, which is go to college, get a college degree in software, then go to university and graduate from university and go into the industry and get a job. However, we've really identified within Greenlord Studios that that's not the only route, and it's not always best. So one of our employees, James, he came straight out of college and into the industry because he identified that the sort of academic approach to programming just really wasn't for him. One of my best friends, he went down the code bootcamp route and just was like, I'm just going to learn to code and then start programming, and went that route. But whatever you take, it's just about being able to show that you can do the job, because university degrees are good for certain types of people, brains, and attitudes, but it's not for everyone, and that shouldn't exclude you from trying to get into the industry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's so many avenues that developers can go down now, and I think it is sometimes difficult to gauge like what's the best one. And I think the companies that do well and hire good are the ones that are open to all the different avenues. And I think for me, I've always found that it's how much somebody wants it. So if they're a software developer, and how it's sort of like how much they like doing the work as well, and like how what's the word I'm looking for? Like when they're really like passionate. Sorry, that's the one. Yeah. So what I found is that sometimes it depends on like how passionate somebody is about getting into the industry as well, and they may not have had the opportunity to go to university, but they've spent that time doing projects in their own time, or learning things, probably similar to you, where they've had the opportunity, where they're curious about creating websites, and they've got like a local business in the family, and they've helped them with projects like that. So how old are you, Josh, if you don't mind me asking?
So I'm 30, so when I say 15 years, I'm counting from that first job that I got making a website for a friend of my mum's, and that's really where it got started. So.
Yeah. What sort of business was that, and what sort of tools did you use to develop it, if you can remember?
So that was originally they were a company in Dubai that build. So there's lots of exhibitions in Dubai, and for those exhibitions they have like bespoke creations to sort of house whatever it is you're exhibitioning in, and it was a website for them. And it was a tool called Macro Media Dreamweaver, I think it was, but that's a long time ago. I'm not sure that's used at all now, and it was just sort of JavaScript, HTML sort of framework.
I think I remember some macro media applications on like old Windows, maybe like media players and things like that.
Yeah.
From memory. So going back to sort of your age, I think you're in a bit of a unique position where you're a CTO at quite a young age, and I know from speaking to you, it was sort of something that as a co-founder you sort of found yourself being in that position. So could you tell me a little bit about how that works? Because usually somebody who is a CTO may have worked for a few different software companies, and maybe after 10, 15 years they found themselves in that position. So could you tell us a little bit about how you found yourself in a CTO position and how that looked?
Yeah, so obviously, we founded our company straight out of university, just as 3 friends, 3 directors, and we never thought much about sort of, labels for our positions. But as we started to move on, employ people, and it wasn't just worrying about what I'm doing, it's, what's everyone who's working for us. You need someone who's got a handle on the technical strategy of the company, and it very quickly becomes a CTO-like role. And then when you're going forward and dealing with people like to deal with the CTO. But obviously, as you've said, it's normally you work for a few different people, and there's a long road to becoming a CTO. So I had to react very quickly to that. Fortunately, because we do agency work, we get to work with so many different clients, people, and teams. So whenever I was working with a different company and they had CTOs, technical people high up, I would always just try to listen to them, work out what they did really well. And when you've spoken to a few, you start to see traits of, oh, I think they do that really well, but the other company I've spoken to and their CTO was doing this really well, and using that to build up a picture of really what it involves. But with tech, the biggest thing you can do is really speak to the people that you're working with, because everyone's got something to teach, and you've always got, you'll be surprised at how much people will be learning from you just from hearing you speak, and it's very collaborative business. So,
yeah, fantastic. And what prompted you and your friends to start a company? Were you all on the same university course? And I think some listeners probably be interested in how do I set up a software company? How did you find yourselves being in that position?
Yeah, so we had a bit of a strange route to starting a company. So my university degree was in computer games programming, which was predominantly with a program called Unity, and that was C#, which is how we ended up specializing in .NET, because moving from Unity to C# was an easy progression. But we wanted to start as a games company, and after going around speaking to all the games companies in the area, because we didn't just want to start a company without doing our research, we found out a lot of them were staying afloat with non-game related contract work. And we just sort of decided, actually, while we really do like video games, maybe what we're more interested in and passionate about is building products. So that's how we ended up moving and pivoting into just being a software studio, because what we really enjoyed was working with customers, sort of bringing ideas from paper to life, or maybe it's working with a customer who's got an existing product that they're not happy with and getting that into a state that they're really, proud of, or even just I really like working with a company where they just don't have the internal resources and need someone to plug the gap for a bit, because it's useful for them, and I get an insight into other businesses and how they operate.
Great. No, that sounds really interesting, and it's great that it was something that you were passionate about, but also you didn't sort of let that passion sort of cloud the sort of opportunity that you saw there as well, and you were able to pivot to doing something that's sort of related but a little bit different.
Yeah.
How did you guys get set up, like financially, and how did all that happen? Did you receive any support from the university or from any external sources?
So if you're starting a business straight out of your university, I don't know what the case would be now, but we had lots of incubation schemes, and it wasn't a huge amount, but we got about £5,000 worth of grant money. And because of what we were doing, where we were immediately working with clients to build products, we were able to go from that 5,000 to some kind of income fairly quickly. Admittedly, in the early days, we did whatever we could for money, so we flipped WordPress templates where we could, just to make enough money to keep the doors open. But never, if you can do the work and it adds value, never think, oh, well, it's not 100% what we do. if it keeps the lights open in the early days, that's really what you need to focus on, because surviving the first couple of years when you start a business is what matters, because it does get easier.
No, 100%. No, I can vouch for that as well. So how big's the team at Greenlord currently?
So it's about 10 people. We've got 2 T-level students, 3 full-time employees, 4 full-time employees, 2 T-level students, and the 3 directors. So that's 9 people. Yeah,
and how long have you been in business for now?
About 8 years
8
now.
years, brilliant. I love a local success story. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. And, myself, I've worked in the .NET space for about 7 years, and majority of the companies in the northeast are sort of in Newcastle, Sunderland area. So I do love hearing about some of the good work that's happening locally in Teesside, because there's some really, really great software businesses locally as well. So still quite a young company. Obviously, you're young yourself.
Yep.
I appreciate there's probably been quite a lot of challenges when it comes to growing the company, because between yourself and your friends, it's like the first business that you've probably owned together. So you find yourself, obviously now in a team of 10. How have you gone about sort of expanding your skills to the needs of the business? So have you sought out mentors to help you with, obviously not just your role, but to help manage the rest of the company as well?
So we've been really fortunate, and we've had a few mentors from different areas that have helped expand our skill set and understand what's really required from a business. We've had some of the mentors be more directly involved, so we've got non-executive directors who help with their knowledge, but we've also got other mentors from our incubation period, where they have no official connection to the company, and we just meet up for coffee to discuss things, because it's really important to build relationships, some very much concrete and business-like, but others just make friends with people and speak to them, because that's really where you're going to get sort of the best advice possible, because it's not going to come from I need to give you this advice and this is the correct advice because it's what you're supposed to give, and more personal from a friend, and that's going to be the really good advice. So make friends with your mentors. They're not just knowledge repositories.
No, absolutely. And sometimes opportunities just come out of those conversations as well. So I found that even just being in Flock, there's people like Imran from Alt Labs, there's other businesses here where you'll just end up just having a conversation in terms of how's business going, and before you know it, you're speaking about maybe some companies you're working with or some companies that you might want an introduction to, and lo and behold, they'll know somebody from that company, and I know that's how we were introduced. I know you do some work with Imran and Alt Labs, and he mentioned yourselves, and because I knew that you guys recruit or have .NET developers, I spoke to him, and it just opened a few doors. But meeting people, collaborating, giving value back as well. So I feel like I was probably quite apprehensive meeting with companies and CTOs of companies, because I was worried that they think I'm a recruiter and all I'm going to do is try and win work from them. But what I found is that if you can provide them with value and be their ear to the market, then they'll respect you and opportunities come. And likewise, I learn so much from speaking to people in your position, Josh, from the podcast. We've had a couple of coffees and we've had some really good, deep conversations about hiring, about, the .NET market and stuff like that. So, I can attest to that. I feel like it's really important to build relationships, seek out mentors, seek out people working in the industry to help improve your knowledge and skills as well.
But yeah, it's why spaces like Flock are sort of really cool and important, because you never know how everything's going to fit together. But we ended up meeting because our business development manager was speaking with Imran at Alt Labs, and then an introduction was made. And I know for us it's really difficult because we get messages from recruiters all the time, and it's just sort of you end up mentally filtering it. But hopefully with the way work is going, we will be recruiting at some stage. And now when we have to do that, instead of I know exactly which recruiter we'll go to, because I know that you especially, you're not just got a massive spreadsheet of a million different jobs that you have, no idea if people are going to be right for them, but you'll just keep throwing stuff until someone lands. You know the market, you're here for .NET, which is good for us because we're .NET. So we wouldn't have that relationship if it wasn't for spaces like this.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, I think space like this are really important for Teesside, and yeah, I've met some fantastic people here and grew my knowledge. Even when it comes to the podcast, having somebody like Aaron from Loop Media here as well has been really helpful for me, because it just means I can come in here, sit down, have a chat, and don't have to worry about anything else to do with the podcast. So it's all taken care of. I guess, yeah, just continuing the theme of improving knowledge and speaking to people. How have you sort of gone about improving like management skills? And I know some of that does come with experience, but have you sort out, what ways have you improved your management skills?
So the main way we improved our management skills is looking at really good sort of industry-used management frameworks. So I ended up doing a lot of research in really how to run Agile, because it's a good way of sort of looking at people. And then on top of that, I did a lot of reading on the topic and, looked into, because a big part of management is leadership, and like, what does effective leadership look like in a company? And it's sort of all of those things, because you need to balance the, I guess, more soft side of management, which is the leadership, looking after the people that work for you and making sure things get done on time, to the more scientific side of that, which is, Agile framework, sorting things into sprints and breaking down tasks.
Okay. And how do you go about building like a positive culture in your team?
I think that really starts with management, and one of the big things very early on that I think a lot of people are really worried about is getting things wrong, and there tends to be a culture in a lot of places I've noticed where people are afraid to admit to mistakes. So one of the things I did very early on is I actually get really excited when I've got something wrong, because in the most public place in the company, I go and tell everyone. I normally just say like, "Oh, sorry, this has happened," because I want anything that is wrong or has gone wrong needs to be said immediately, because the longer that's sort of pushed under the table or under the rug, that's where the real issues come across. Because if it gets to a deadline and it's not going to be made, but people knew it wasn't going to be made 4 weeks ago, I could have done something 4 weeks ago. I can't do something 2 days before the deadline. So it's really creating a culture where people take pride and ownership in their work, but also understand that we're all human. And it's, it can be a difficult industry, because people are always terrified when something might go wrong with production, and everyone has been through that. And providing that you take ownership of the issue and don't hide it, we can always fix it.
Yeah, I think, I love that. I think everyone then just feels a bit more comfortable and safe when they're at work as well, knowing that, look, Josh is the CTO, he can make mistakes, we all can, and it's about how you deal with them in an efficient way. And I think having that open communication is really useful as well. So talking about mistakes, I think there's quite, I'm not sure if you can call it a misconception about working for, a software agency where, sometimes you're at the mercy of your clients and deadlines. So do you think like having the ability to make mistakes even in that sort of pressurized environment is important?
I would argue it's even more important, because no matter how good your systems are, mistakes are going to happen, and you need to understand how you're going to deal with that. And that really stems from knowing that there is a problem. The biggest thing that will hurt a relationship with a client is if you do something last minute. If you're very open early on and you speak to them, it's much easier to sort of nip any issues in the bud. But if it's like 5 minutes before a deadline that it all comes out that it's never going to work, that's what's really scary. Like, communication is important, and that all starts from knowing any issues before they've become like a really big issue.
Yeah. So like they often say like leaders like have a big impact in the culture of the team. How would you describe like your leadership?
So I'm very much I lead from the back. I'm open, honest, and I make sure that everyone who works for me knows that I have their back and I'm not against them. Like, it's important that everyone feels that we're on the same team and we're all working hard. It's impossible, in my mind, to be an effective leader if people don't look at your work ethic, the way you carry yourself. If if you're not turning up to work on time, if you're clearly doing less work, it really breaks down that trust. I've got not so much bosses I know, but I'll occasionally speak to friends in other fields, and it will be very apparent that their boss will hold everyone else to a high standard, but then very clearly have a lower one for themselves, and it's just not. It just doesn't bring out the best in people at all.
No, yeah, I can totally agree with that as well. I've been in scenarios myself personally. I'm thinking of bosses where, I found that and it can be quite demotivating as well.
Yeah, when they'll constantly criticize you and then you look at what they're doing and it's just like, well, there's clearly a disparity here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I wanted to ask about dealing with conflict, because you'll get conflict in any company when you've got, obviously, humans and people working alongside each other. So how do you tend to deal with conflict, and do you think it's useful, or do you think it's good to have conflict in high-performing teams?
So when there's conflict, the biggest thing you need to remove from it is you need to stop it from becoming personal. So like a big way we resolve conflict is we try to keep everything back to the facts rather than it ever ending up as a personal attack. So I think the biggest thing is there's always going to be conflict, but if you always take it back to what's written down, take minutes for your meetings, always make sure everyone knows what's been agreed, it's much easier to navigate those conflicts, because there's nothing worse than it turning into a he said, she said. And again, if making a mistake isn't the worst possible thing, when it comes to negotiating a conflict, if someone's in a space where they're comfortable to just put their hands up and go, yeah, that's on me, that's the best resolution for a conflict. But no, it's definitely unavoidable. It definitely happens. And it's not easy, but deal with everything head on and don't be passive aggressive. Just keep everything on the table, stick to the facts, and never let it get personal.
Do you think it's healthy sometimes to have conflict in the team?
To a degree. Like, there's nothing wrong with when you're trying to get the best decision, when you're talking about technology, like there is to a degree of getting two ideas that are opposing and just trying to work out which is the best. As long as you can put down that conflict afterwards, then it's useful. So like a lot of the time we'll debate. Sometimes I'll suggest a technology. Maybe our most senior dev, Scott, will go, I actually think that's a bad idea. At that point, the conflict is really good, because it's not me versus Scott. It's let's take these two things. We'll both advocate for them, and then we can work out really what the best tool is for that job. Yeah,
great. How important is allyship and diversity in teams, do you think?
So in tech, I think diversity is super important across. You need, when you're solving a problem, you need as many different ways of looking at that problem, and that's why diversity, especially in technology, is so important, because there's 1,001 ways to solve a problem, and from the way I was raised, brought up, and my experience of the world, I'm going to have one very specific way of looking at it. While if you've got a diverse team, they're going to have different angles of attack, and that's just so important. So I think diversity is often really important, but especially in tech.
Brilliant. How would you say the makeup of the team has been for yourselves, and have you found it challenging to have a diverse team? I guess being from a smaller catchment area like Teesside is, have you done anything to maybe help you widen the pool a little bit in order to make the team more diverse at Greenlord?
So one thing I will say, because of our location, a diverse team it's actually difficult, because we only have access to the candidates that apply. Fortunately, we've managed to avoid just hiring all the same candidates, and we have ended up with more diverse hires, but it is really difficult. And I do sort of wonder, this is something I've thought for a while, if we need to go all the way back and make sure that there's no barriers to anyone coming into the industry, because it really is an industry that should be for everyone, and historically it hasn't been, and there's no reason it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So next section, I just wanted to talk a little bit about interviews, progression, and sort of how you assess developers when they come to interview you. So I work with a lot of junior, mid-level, senior developers who often are interviewing at companies. So I wanted to give them a little bit of an insight in terms of what the other side of the table looks for when interviewing. So I just wanted to, so like initially, like the first question is like, what sort of qualities do you and I guess the wider team look for in developers when they come into interview?
So one of the biggest things we look for, especially in an agency, is an openness to picking up new technology, which I think is just good for your career anyway, because if you're too precious about your tool, you might be leaving something else on the table that could be like an additional tool. And it's always worth just picking up new technologies and then being able to show that, because the way the industry moves, it can be quite rapid, and it's massive to the people running the company if they know, like, oh, there's this new tool, oh, we can give it to whoever we've just interviewed because they seem really keen to pick up something new. So that's something, especially as an agency, we look for.
Great. I was actually speaking to a development manager yesterday. He mentioned that, so he's predominantly been .NET, most of his career. He started his job as a development manager, but either he wanted to or the company then needed him to do a bit of hands-on work as well, but it was Java.
Yeah.
But he told me that he taught himself Java in 2 days. But obviously I don't know like what level up to, but basically he was open to obviously picking that up. And I think I'm not a techie myself, but some people have said once you sort of learn one or two sort of programming languages, it can make it a bit easier to then pick up another technology. Of course it's hard work, of course you have to dedicate time to doing it, but I think it can be a bit more simpler. Is that fair to say?
I always view programming languages and technology like tools, and you build up a base as a programmer or like a plumber, and you might get new tools, you might throw some out, but that's very much your languages and what you use. So yeah, once you've learnt to use a few different tools, you understand what problems they're trying to solve, and you get ahead for the methodology. So the more tools you pick up, the better you're going to be as a programmer. Because I've found now I've got like quite a few languages I'm comfortable with. The best choice to solve a problem isn't always your favorite programming language. Like there'll be one that's actually better suited for it. So if I've got to do mobile development, I'm happy to maybe develop that natively in Java. Although if I know the requirement is, actually we need both an Android and an iOS app on a smaller budget, then I'm like, okay, well then it's got to be TypeScript with something like React, because that's going to be much easier to build both apps out with a smaller budget. So you've always got to be thinking about how the programming language, is it right for the project and that sort of thing. Yeah,
great. And so when you're interviewing, what sort of questions do you ask developers to assess their problem-solving skills?
So problem-solving skills, we tend to... we've got our initial code test, which is sort of the main way we assess their ability to technically problem-solve. But we tend to look for examples of it, so projects. So if we find out they've been working on a project, normally if you can identify periods where you've solved problems and give an example, it's really obvious to us, like, oh, the way they're talking about that, especially like when you get passionate about it because it was, something you thought was really interesting. We really like to see it because it sort of has that, oh, they've solved that problem, they're really passionate about it, and it sort of really does come across easily in an interview, especially if you get carried away with it and it goes on for longer than it should have done because you were talking about it. Like if you're in an interview and time goes on longer than it really should have done because you were all just interested in the conversation, that's a really good place to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what would you say are some of the more sort of like common pitfalls and mistakes you see at interview and you'd maybe sort of advise against?
So a big issue at the interview is if you really don't see yourself in that role, and where that comes across is normally when you get the additional questions. You should have really specific questions about their tech stack that says to the person, like, I see myself working here. How can I, when I do get the job, because that's also just a good way to think of it in the interview because it will get rid of some of the fear, is how am I going to fit in? What technologies are you using? How does your deployment pipeline work? And all of those sorts of questions can sometimes even throw back the interview because they're like, oh, we use this. I wasn't expecting to, explain some of the stuff I would normally be saying on day one on your, one or two questions you tend to get at the end of the interview.
Yeah, so you'd say that a good way is to sort of picture yourself working for that company and asking specific questions about what, like you said, what sort of frameworks, what deployments are you doing, and almost like you're almost sort of manifesting it in a little bit, but then it can maybe make the interviewer subconsciously think of, actually, well, if this person was doing this job and he's asking these questions, he could be a good fit.
Well, yeah, it's exactly that, because if they're asking those questions, the biggest issue you have when hiring anyone new is how long is it going to take them to get to a point where they can do the job? Because obviously there's going to be a wind-up time, but those questions say to me like, oh, they're already thinking about how they can start getting code contributed. They're thinking about working the job rather than trying to get me to hire them. They're trying to figure out how to work for me, which is, a much better place to be.
No, it's really interesting. That's really good. Again, another tip that I can give developers when they're interviewing. So within your company then, have you hired anybody who you feel has like progressed really rapidly and really quickly in their software development career, I guess, within your company? And what would you say were some of the reasons why they were able to do that?
So one of the people who worked for us, Kieran, was actually originally a friend of one of the other directors, and he had a software degree that he then just dropped, and that was more to do with back-end low-level C programming, and it just wasn't what we'd done at all. He went back to work for his parents instead, which involved just a lot of boring labour work that really wasn't for him. And then all of a sudden he sort of found out about the company. He was like, I don't have any of the skills you look for. Can you throw me some tutorials and I'll start looking at them? And initially I was sort of like, yeah, okay, I can help out, but I don't know if you could ever come work for us. And then repeatedly he'll be like, oh, I built this, I've done that. And then a project came up and I'm like, okay, well, we'll temporarily hire you for this project. Fast forward to now, he's one of the best software developers at the company. He loves working for us. We love having him on board.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's crazy. Like it's frustrating because I think he's now better at like .NET development than I am.
But I think that goes back to the passion to do it. And I think maybe the best thing for him was to go back and work in the family.
Yeah.
Because then he probably realised, actually, I can't see myself doing this.
Yeah. I'm
really passionate about development, and this is the area I want to go down. So I thought that's a great story. It's quite unique, but I think it goes to show that if software is an area that you're curious about, that the barrier to entry probably isn't as big as you think.
Yeah.
I think even when I work in it, I do think, I speak to all these clever people. I speak to all these people who are very passionate about development, and they must be really good at maths. They must be really good at all these things. So that can almost, even for me, be like a barrier for, I'd probably never ever become a developer because it seems too difficult. But do you think it's more, if you've got a passion for it and if you're curious about it, it maybe isn't as big a barrier as you may think? So
the biggest thing that in my mind determines whether or not you become a software developer, and it's a really easy one, is do you want to do it? It's not, no other questions. There's no, am I X, Y, or Z? It's, do you want to do it? Keep progressing, because eventually you will get there as long as you want to be there. So some really, really clever people might get there very quickly, or you might be a bit less clever than I am, a bit less clever like I am, and it took me sort of 15 years to really become a mature, good developer, but I always wanted to be here, and I never stopped learning. So, as long as you want to be here, it's a space for everyone, really. It's not... a lot of people I know really put working in tech on a pedestal, and I think that often ends up as their own mental barrier, because they're like, oh, I need the perfect CV, and I need to... I can't start even applying for work until I've got a year's experience, and like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But really, just as long as you want to be there, like you'll make it work.
Yeah. And what sort of continuous learning paths would you recommend for developers to use or do? I guess in order to like progress the career.
Yeah. So I don't want to. I'm not affiliated with anyone. This is just personally what I use. But it's sites like, not limited to, Pluralsight, and just find topics that you're interested in. So we were able to start doing more work with Kubernetes and sort of container orchestration, and that all started because I found a bunch of really good courses and just in my spare time picked it up, learnt it, and then we were able to offer that to clients, and now that's a really big avenue for us as well. So I guess find a really good online resource that you like, and then just pick stuff off of it that interests you, because you'll probably find a way of using that as long as it's a fairly used technology. But if it grabs you, go for it, invest in it, and then you might be surprised. It might not directly help you at work, or it might get you a promotion.
Yeah, brilliant. Do you encourage people that work for you to use Pluralsight and sites like that as well? Do you do anything like development time or anything in between projects and training?
Yeah, so because we're an agency, we often have people in between projects. That's just the way of it. And a big thing of that is we have ones we'll immediately pay for, which is things like Pluralsight. Although what we've been doing more of is sometimes an employee will come to us and like, this course is really good. This is how I could think it. And this is how I think it would help the business. Is this something I could get? And we've never said no to that.
Yeah.
Which, if you've got a good relationship with your bosses and you found a course that's maybe a bit expensive but not too bad, like 150 quid to you might seem like a huge amount of money. An employee says that to us and it looks like good value. We're like, yeah, easy, in a heartbeat, we can sign that off.
Oh, brilliant. Fantastic. So what does the future look like for Josh and for Greenlord?
So I'd like to grow the business slowly but steadily. So because obviously things have been quite difficult with the previous financial year, I've decided that what Greenlord really needs to be is a safe place for anyone who works for us. So we will want to grow the team as more work comes in, but we want to do it in a stable fashion, because I've always viewed Greenlord as having two clients, one of which is all the external clients, and everyone who works for us. We have a responsibility to both of those people, and I need to make sure that we can provide stable jobs for the people who work for us and still manage to grow our capability. So it'll be, I guess, slow expansion is the future of Greenlord.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think it's great that you're providing opportunities in Teesside and the local area, because as we know, it can be quite challenging, especially with how things have been going with COVID, and then with cost of living and all the sort of different sort of outside environmental factors. But I think it's great to have a Teesside built company that's obviously making a mark in the software industry. So long may it continue.
Yeah.
So brilliant, fantastic. I've really enjoyed our chat today, Josh. I've got some, I feel like I've got some really interesting stuff that our viewers can find interesting. And obviously I'll keep a close eye on how you and the team get on at Greenlord. And hopefully everyone can get some value from today's chat. So really appreciate you coming along. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks.
Cool.